Coming up on Lawmakers, Senate hearings begin in the wake of last week's courthouse shooting deaths. The Senate approves a House measure that would allow private clubs to deny spousal benefits to same-sex partners. And success in any language. Elementary school students come to the Capitol to lobby for their education. Those stories and more are next.
From Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Thursday, March 17th. Here are your anchors, Wendy Lawson and Gerald Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's program, the Senate approves a measure supporting the public display of the Ten Commandments.
And fireworks in the House over a bill that would legalize the sale of sparklers. But our top story tonight, the security of state and local government buildings. In response to the courthouse shootings last Friday, the Senate Public Safety Committee met yesterday to discuss a two-pronged approach to studying courthouse security and ended up passing legislation that could go into effect when the session ends. David Zelski joins us from the Capitol with the details. David.
Well, thanks, Wendy. Committee Chairman Brian Kemp mentioned one idea where the state would hire 2 courthouse inspectors to monitor security. The second approach, which passed out of committee, Senate Resolution 431, sets up a study commission to discuss some ideas. 431 sponsor, Senator Joseph Carter, explains.
7 members of the Senate to study this issue and to issue an official report by the end of the year addressing any particular need for legislation. We decided to take this approach, Mr. Chairman, because we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to this problem. We certainly don't know at this point what the answers are. What we want to do, as Mr. Norris has discussed, is to bring all the players to the table, to hear their concerns, their issues, and to try to formulate a possible answer to see if there is a legislative response that's necessary.
I think there is something the state can do, and I think this is a great step in the right direction. I think that from this we may come out with some basic standards that we all can live by without imposing too much Big Brother on our local entities.
As time passes from the events of last week, we all revert back to the things that we did in the past. And so security may be tighter today in a few places, but it will go back to the way that it was unless we put something in place to keep people at a certain level. And that's probably going to be the focus of our work on this committee.
Now, as Senator Carter mentioned, the Senate Study Commission would consist of 7 senators and are scheduled to meet 3 times unless they decide after the 3rd that more are necessary. Senate Resolution 431 now heads to the Senate floor. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Thanks so much, David.
In other news, the Senate today passed a resolution encouraging the display of the Ten Commandments in public buildings. The sponsor, Senator Nancy Schaefer.
This body encourages our citizens to support the public display of the Ten Commandments and other historical documents that acknowledge God in the founding and establishing of our nation. Be it further resolved that this body encourages the Governor of Georgia to continue to support those public displays of the Ten Commandments that already exist in our state, as well as promote the practice of displaying the Ten Commandments in public buildings as an appropriate way to acknowledge God, the moral foundation of our laws.
Senate Resolution 326, which does not have the force of law, passed 41-8. The Senate also passed a resolution urging Congress to support any nominations President Bush makes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Senator David Schaefer sponsors Senate Resolution 303.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Senate Resolution 303 urges the United States Senate to support our President's nominees to the United States Supreme Court. It appears likely that there will be a vacancy on the Supreme Court during this presidential term and that the President will be called upon to make a nomination for this vacancy. In the last term, we saw a minority of the membership of the United States Senate use the rules of that body to frustrate the Constitution of our nation and prevent the President's nominees to the Court of Appeals from even being voted upon.
This is a waste. What a waste of time and a waste of taxpayer money. And frankly, I think it's quite presumptuous of us to think that the United States Senate would be particularly interested in the opinion of the Georgia Senate on this issue. But the worst part about this really is not the waste and not the fact that it lacks any modesty, you're being asked to vote for a resolution that urges confirmation of people who are unnamed and unknown.
Senate Resolution 303 passed 36 to 10. Also, the Senate passed a bill today that would give private organizations the freedom to decide whether or not to provide benefits to unmarried couples. Lawmakers Chris Knight joins us from the Capitol with more on the Senate's passage of House Bill 67. Chris.
Well, Gerald, House Bill 67 aims to protect the right of association for private businesses and clubs. The legislation would prohibit cities from creating civil rights codes that supersede those of the state. House Bill 67 comes in response to the dispute between the City of Atlanta and the Druid Hills Golf Club, a private golf club which does not extend spousal benefits to same-sex couples. The Senate passed the legislation today, but not without some debate first.
Senator, will Senator further yield?
I will absolutely yield.
Is it not true that the people of the Druid Hills Golf Course have had an amiable relationship around this and have tried to work this out on their own, and the state has gotten involved simply because the City of Atlanta has extended the goodwill of their city council into addressing an issue that could have been worked out on a local basis?
It's an issue that has not been worked out on a local basis. There's litigation pending, and this is simply the legislature saying the Constitution was amended. The marriage is defined as a marriage between a man and a woman, and there's no right for a city government or county government or state government to require private organizations to provide benefits to unmarried persons.
I happen to represent the largest gay and lesbian constituent in the southeastern United States. These are some of the most prominent individuals in my community: doctors, lawyers, physicians, journalists, even some lawmakers. And I am not going to support a bill that would infringe upon their basic rights to live as they choose in my district.
And House Bill 67 passed by a vote of 37 to 11. The bill now awaits the governor's signature. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Chris Knight for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Well, the House today voted to streamline the court procedure for legitimating children born out of wedlock. Senate Bill 53 permits fathers to declare paternity and establish custody and visitation in a single hearing. The House added a requirement that the action be filed in the home county of the mother or the legal guardian of the child in most cases. Representative Wendell Willard explains the amendment to Representative Don Parsons.
A situation where you can't find the mother and she's out of state or unknown as far as her location. In that circumstance, you could file it in the county of the residence of the father by virtue of having the court approve a petition to be advertised as a means of getting notice and service upon the unlocated mother.
If you'll yield for one more question.
Yes, sir.
Currently, a father can petition the court to legitimate.
Yes, sir.
He can have that approved by the court. And then after that, there's a process he can go through to petition for custody and visitation rights.
That's correct.
My question is, does this change that any as far as what he would currently do once he was legitimated, or once he legitimated a child?
Yes, sir, it does. It puts it all under one proceeding, provided the court has the correct venue. That venue would be in the county of the residence of the mother if she can be located.
Senate Bill 53 passed by a vote of 153 to 3. Because it was amended in the House, it now goes back to the Senate.
Child support law in the state may soon get an overhaul. House Bill 221 would update the state system of how child support orders are calculated. That bill passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee this afternoon. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman joins us from the Capitol with more. Jesse.
Well, Jared, House Bill 221 does not go into the specifics about how child support orders would change, but it does shift from a percentage standard model where child support is based on the non-custodial parent's income to an income shares model where the income of both parents is accounted for. The bill would set up a commission that would work out the exact details of the changes. Here's a sampling of what the Judiciary Committee heard today.
Communities of faith and the state have a joint interest in seeing that additional children don't fall below the poverty line. Caring parents would never give to their children an unknown medicine. House Bill 221 is at this point an unknown medicine.
As has already been stated, I think the fact that we don't know the impact that this bill will have on child support orders should be a cause for concern. I've had a number of parents call me and say, okay, now the bill's been changed, so what's the child support going to be under this new bill? And I've said, I don't know.
By decreasing the resources available to the custodial parent who is attempting to maintain, most often, her family, we increase the likelihood that children will end up in the custody of the state rather than in the custody of either parent.
So we had a system that was based on a failed economic model, It's been in existence for 35 years, and we've never made economic data. We've never determined economic data that has ever done that.
Now, that commission that will eventually set up the new formula for child support orders will consist of 15 members, all appointed by the governor. There were no amendments to the bill, which has already passed the House. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
A Senate plan to legalize the sale of certain fireworks fizzled out in the House today. Presenting the bill, Representative David Graves explained that 85 fireworks outlets now border this state and make the acquisition of the products very easy for Georgians. He also said that the sparklers referred to in the bill rarely contribute to childhood injuries. This drew fire from Representative Penny Houston.
For the number of children that are injured on bicycles, to compare it with the number of children that are injured in sparklers, is that a rational comparison?
Yes, ma'am. These are just facts. Per 100,000 youth across the country, you have 840 on bicycles, and sparklers there's 1. So it's not a rational, irrational. It's just a fact. That's how many there are.
Do you think if we had as many children using sparklers as they do bicycles, we might have a few more hurt?
Ma'am, that maybe obviously with more use you may have more, but we have within 1 hour of almost 3/4 of citizens in this state, you can buy sparklers, bring them in, and all this.
The bill passed by a large margin in the Senate 1 month ago. Today, Republican and Democratic members of the Women's Legislative Caucus united in opposition to Senate Bill 133. Representative Sharon Cooper said she was speaking on behalf of firefighters and that she had personal experience with the dangers of flammables.
I talk about my mother, but she's not my real mother. She's my adopted mother. On the day before my 12th birthday, there was a fire in the restaurant that my dad and mother owned, and my mother was severely burned, and she died 2 days after my 12th birthday. As a nurse, I have worked the burn units. It is absolutely the worst duty a nurse can draw, and only worse than the adult burn unit is the children's burn unit.
Senate Bill 133 was defeated 67 to 96. The sponsor plans to call on the House to reconsider its actions on Monday.
And the Senate today voted in favor of a House bill that makes a change to the state's existing law regulating the tinting of vehicle windows. Here's Senator John Douglas.
The old law applied only to vehicles that were registered in the state of Georgia, and the Georgia Supreme Court ruled in 2003 that the law must apply to all vehicles traveling in Georgia, not just vehicles registered here. And so this bill reflects that change. Other than that, it keeps the same level of tint and reflectivity that has been allowed for over 20 years in Georgia, and it is strongly supported by Georgia law enforcement groups and the International Window Film Association.
House Bill 20, the window tinting bill, passed by a vote of 45 to 4 and goes to Governor Sonny Perdue for his signature.
The House today agreed to add protections for hunting and fishing to the state's constitution. Representative Earl Earhart explained the need for such a safeguard.
It's a very large part of our culture. It's very hunting and fishing teach responsibility to young people, and it's the kind of thing that we want to preserve for all time. As you know, in certain countries around the world, certain things happen and these rights go away. If you wanted an object example of that, you should have been in the committee to hear the individual that testified against this. If you had heard that individual, you would know why we need this kind of legislation.
8 other states have constitutional protections for hunting and fishing. Senate Resolution 67 passed by a vote of 152 to 0. To become part of the state constitution, it now requires 2/3 approval by voters in a referendum.
And now it's time to talk with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitalImpact.com. I asked him about the continuing dispute over voter ID bills sponsored by House and Senate Republicans.
Well, Gerald, similar bills have passed both the House and the Senate, and now at least one of them would have to get through the other House to make it to Governor Sonny Perdue's desk to sign. And you're right, this is an issue that divides not only Democrats from Republicans, but blacks from whites as well, because the African-American lawmakers feel that it's an attempt to suppress the black vote or hold it down by forcing them to show up with some very strict ID requirements on Election Day.
And Senator Robert Brown, who is the minority leader in the Senate, is even saying that this is something that is going to have a life past the General Assembly and is promising or at least hinting at some further action.
That's right. When he met with the media yesterday, he said they would be making an announcement later this week, early next week, about what appears to be some mass protests that they're going to try to organize against these bills if it looks like they are indeed going to get out of the General Assembly. So there's a lot of hard feelings on this one that have yet to be resolved.
Let's move on to some issues that may or may not come up in the remaining days. In the Senate today, a couple of non-binding resolutions, one in support of the display of the Ten Commandments in public buildings, the other urging the Senate to confirm judicial nominees to the Supreme Court by President Bush, which kind of brings up the issue of faith-based initiatives. Are we going to see that again, or is that pretty much dead for the session?
Well, you always hate to say that it's something is over or that something is dead and done, but I would think that Governor Perdue's faith-based initiative, which the Senate voted down last Friday, probably is not going to come back up again this session. It would be hard to find something else that they could attach it to as an amendment. So we'll have to put that argument aside for a while, I think.
But there may be some other bills out there that could still see the light of day. The other is House Bill 218. This is that controversial bill that would allow some secrecy when the state or governments are negotiating with a business to bring them in, and that some stages of those negotiations could be held in private. Are we likely to see that again?
I think that's a possibility. It was never rejected by the Senate. It's sort of hanging out there in limbo right now. I think an attempt will be made to bring it up for a vote sometime between now and the end of the session. Could be wrong, but I think it'll be back with us. I just don't know when.
Finally, Tom, we saw an actual schedule for the rest of the session today, which showed it going 40 days. At least House Republicans had hinted at going 38 or 39. Are we going to go the full 40 days, or is there going to be an April 1st surprise?
Well, they can still adjourn on day 38 if they feel they've got everything taken care of. What they adopted today was a schedule that said basically, if we go 40 days, here's when it will end. But I think they would still like to make that symbolic gesture of shutting things down early. All right, Tom, our time is up. Thanks for joining us tonight on Lawmakers. Great to be here.
Representatives of local municipalities say they're concerned about proposed preemptions to Senate Bill 90, the Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act. The House Health and Human Services Committee drafted an amendment that would keep city or county governments from passing stronger smoking bans locally.
Our concern is, to be honest with you, is preemption. We have a pretty good ordinance. We've modified ours somewhat to meet our local needs. My concern is it's worked out pretty well. And for the state to want to come in there on this bill, I have a real problem with that.
Every community should be able to decide whether they want that or not. So there should be some flexibility on the part of each community to tailor-make it to their own needs and circumstances.
Senate Bill 90 passed out of committee today without change. Supporters of that legislation hope that the preemption issue will not be offered as an amendment on the House floor.
The Senate Ethics Committee heard testimony on House Bill 48 yesterday. That's Governor Sonny Perdue's attempt to strengthen the ethics laws governing elected officials and lobbyists. The governor's House floor leader, Representative Rich Golick, explained why he thinks ethics reform is needed.
When citizens see headlines above the fold about every 3 to 6 months about somebody getting indicted for something, that's going to erode the public trust. And we have a responsibility, I know we all agree, to restore that faith, because it really is faith in the state government. That's our responsibility. It's a tough job. The governor, again, has sought to tackle that tough job for 3 years in a row. This represents the third year of that effort.
Now, the House made several changes to the governor's bill, including the provisions restricting how campaign contributions could be spent. Teddy Lee, head of the State Ethics Commission, says the House changes dilute the current law.
You may only use those contributions to defray ordinary and necessary expenses incurred in connection with either your efforts to be elected to public office, your efforts to retain or fulfill the office. Those are the only things, and they're specifically set out in 33. This definition puts in sort of a little laundry list, but, you know, the catch-all phrase at the end basically makes a mockery of the entire definition. It basically says, or anything else we spend the money on.
Members of the Senate Ethics Committee also question the House changes. The committee meets again tomorrow and is expected to adopt several amendments before voting on the bill next week.
Well, Senate and House Democrats continue their opposition to Republican-backed bills that would require voters to show specific photo IDs in order to vote. Yesterday, Senate Minority Leader Robert Brown spoke against bills passed in the House and Senate last Friday.
we thought, many of us across the spectrum, thought that we had moved much farther along in the state than we apparently have, and if the Republicans are going to insist on us going back, we're going to have to resort to the kind of mass protests and other things that we did to bring attention to this fact of how they are treating us under the conditions of that new rule.
Senator Brown said he'll have an announcement soon about possible mass protests against the voter ID bills, but he said any demonstrations would probably not occur before the end of this legislative session. Meanwhile, House Democratic Caucus Chair Calvin Smyre commented on Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan's action in refusing to yield the well on Saturday while she spoke against the voter ID bills.
I have seen examples of areas of the violation of the rules, and naturally this was a violation of the rules. And from that standpoint, Representative Porter and myself and the members of our caucus, we respect the quorum and the rules of the House, and we would act accordingly. So from our discussions, we are trying to continue on in that regard, and hopefully this issue will be behind us within the next day or so.
The Democratic leaders say the dispute between Representative Thomas Morgan and Speaker Glenn Richardson should not overshadow what they consider to be the bigger issue of the voter ID bills.
Senate Majority Leader Bill Stevens announced today that he'll be running for the 2006 Republican nomination for Secretary of State.
I believe that we live in the best state, in the best nation in the history of mankind. But here in the middle of the first decade of a new century, the decisions we make and the people that we elect will define the quality of life in this state, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren. It's time that we started making those decisions together, and I look forward to being there with you as your first Republican Secretary of State. God bless you for being here, and God bless the great state of Georgia. Thank you all very much. I'm running for Secretary of State because it's an important constitutional office that can help create jobs and secure fair elections and do a lot to protect older Georgians, and I think I can do a better job at the office than anybody else who's running.
Former State Senator Carol Jackson has announced she'll seek the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State.
Well, elementary school students from across Georgia hope to keep foreign language classes in their schools. Some young constituents were at the Capitol today utilizing their language skills to lobby legislators. Lawmakers Angela Vondrasek has more.
The Elementary School Foreign Languages program allows students through grade 5 to learn languages such as Spanish, French, German, and Japanese.
Learning a second language literally changes the brain of a child and builds synapses or connections in their brains. It also makes learning any additional languages much easier. We know people who are trilingual and speak 4 and 5 different languages. It's much easier. Plus, kids say, and I find this intriguing, but when do we really start to understand our own language? It's when we learn a second language. That's when English grammar becomes clear.
And while funding for the program was eliminated by the House, the Senate Appropriations Committee has restored it for the 2005-2006 budget. Representative Stephanie Benfield explained some of the benefits of the program.
Well, studies show that children who know a second language perform better on reading comprehension tests, like the SATs and all these standardized testing, all the standardized tests that children have. Also shows that you learn English better if you know a foreign language.
Español es muy divertido. Español es muy divertido. Español es muy divertido. Español es muy importante y es muy divertido.
It is also believed that learning a foreign language at a young age increases thinking and math skills. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Angela Vondrasek.
Adios!
Well, a group of 8th grade students from Durham Middle School in Ackworth, Georgia, visited the Senate Natural Resources and Environment Committee yesterday, urging them not to cut the New Echota Historic Site in northwest Georgia from the budget. New Echota is the site of the last capital of the Cherokee Nation, a part of history that these students took a unique approach to defend.
I am Samuel Cloud, and I was 9 years old at the time of the Cherokee Indian removal.
I am Private John G. Burnett, Captain Abraham McCollum's Company, 2nd Regiment, 2nd Brigade, Mountain Infantry, Cherokee Indian Removal, 1838 to 1839, sir.
The Cherokees were known as one of the most civilized Native American tribes in all of American history. At our capital in New Echota, we had the first printing press, we had our own newspaper, our own constitution, our own government.
My great-great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess,
And so this is mainly my home, some of my hometown, and I really don't want that to be taken away.
There are few survivors from the Trail of Tears, so I'm sure they want their capital. I mean, they treasure it like we treasure Washington, D.C., and I mean, I'm sure we wouldn't want to see it bulldozed down or anything.
I think I did make a difference because it wouldn't have been the same if it was 5 adults telling them about this, because they might think that all we care about is like maybe there's a new mall being built, but we do care about history.
Well, last year, New Echota brought in over 14,000 visitors, a place DNR Commissioner Noel Holcomb says closing would be an agonizing decision.
Yesterday was NASCAR Day at the Capitol. That's a sport that over 2 weekends contributes millions to the state's economy. Lawmakers David Zelski had a chance to talk with NASCAR legend Bill Elliott about the importance of NASCAR in Georgia.
Join me in welcoming number 91 on your car, number 1 in your heart, Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. Bill Elliott.
To me, if you look at NASCAR and where the whole roots of NASCAR started, it was right here in the Atlanta area.
Several NASCAR trailers were parked outside the Capitol on an unfortunately rainy day, but a few of the true fans were able to come out and show their spirit and meet a few of the teams.
This is the R&J Racing Team. Kevin LePage is the driver, placed 9th at Daytona. This is Roger Craven, this is John Carter, and they own the racing team, and they're from Toccoa. We're extremely proud of them.
P5. Awesome Bill, he's ready to go. He's going to be running that race this weekend, and that pleases the hometown fans who don't get to see him here as much as they used to since he's in semi-retirement. So I'm waiting for the Awesome Bill to be in victory lane. That'd be a perfect end of the week for me.
NASCAR does include the popular stock cars, but there's also the truck drivers, which many find just as exciting.
Most fans, including my good friend Bill Elliott, was even saying that he thinks the truck racing is a little bit better than the car racing. So that's a tribute to the great sport of NASCAR racing.
So if you want to go and get the whole NASCAR Richard Petty experience, you can actually go down to Atlanta Motor Speedway and drive for yourself. This weekend, the Atlanta Motor Speedway in Hampton, Georgia will draw the usual 250,000 fans to watch Awesome Bill from Dawsonville and others vie to take the checkered flag at the Golden Corral 500. And who knows, a few years down the road, you may see one of these 3 dreamers following in his footsteps. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
And this note, Atlanta is actually on the short list of cities being considered for the future site of the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Well, lawmakers will not be broadcast tomorrow because the Georgia General Assembly will not be in session. Lawmakers will return with all the latest from under the Gold Dome Monday at 7 p.m. If you missed any part of this broadcast, tune in when Lawmakers is rebroadcast tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. on GPB. Just a reminder for those of you with access to the Internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Lawmakers is streamed live and archived on our website every night that we're on the air. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night at 7 for Georgia Week in Review. This week, host Susan Hoffman talks with Georgia Supreme Court Justice Leah Sears, soon to be Chief Justice. She'll be the first African-American woman to hold that post. That's coming up tomorrow at 7 and Sunday at 1 p.m. only on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now stay tuned for Prep Sports Plus. That program's coming up next year on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 34th Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. For all of us here at Lawmakers, we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday night.
Bye-bye.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.